You are listening to the Air Raid Hour with host Judge Mathis, dog, Tilt Money, dog, presented by the fine folks over at the Cover One Sports Network, dogs. Bills Mafia, let's go!
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on Twitter at Judge Mathis, joined as always by my co-host Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money. Together, we are the Bills Guys. You can find us on Twitter at the Bills Guys. This is the Air Raid Hour, presented by Picasso's Pizza and Cover One. Dave, it's a Victory Friday. We can toast to a nice little Victory Friday here this evening on a special edition of the Air Raid Hour. The Bills beat the Lions in a Thanksgiving Day thriller, 28-25. The reviews of the win on social media, not exactly the most positive thing you would see after a Thanksgiving Day victory, but a reminder the Bills were without 5 regular starters and then lost another 2 in the game on a short week. Dave, what were your thoughts on the Bills' victory over the Lions yesterday?
Well, I was watching it at my in-laws, so I was probably a little bit more level-headed than I probably would have been normally watching the game if I was just at my house. But at the end, right? I mean, the whole game, I guess I just had this prevailing thought that okay, the Bills are going to eventually get it together, right? They're going to get it together. They're going to get it together. When they went up 14-7, I was like, oh, perfect. We're going to get things going. We're going to pull away, blah, blah, blah. And then that never happens. It was just one of those, I was frustrated kind of in the moment because we weren't pulling away. Obviously, I was very happy at the end of the game because we won. So it's a lot of mixed emotions. And I think that's what you see a lot of right now on social media too, is it's a lot of mixed reviews on the game. There's obviously the win is a win crowd, which I'm not disparaging that, but there's also the people on the full other extreme, this team's going nowhere. I'm in the middle, right? I am objectively in the middle. There are flaws with this team. There are injuries with this team. There are issues with this team, but they're still 8-3 ultimately. And at the moment, atop the AFC East, depending what happens the rest of this weekend, and still looking good to make the playoffs, if not win the division with these 3 AFC East games coming up. So, the glass is half full or half empty. Yeah. It's not totally empty or totally full. So it's really about perspective right now and kind of how you view things.
Yeah, some good perspective. Jessica Tennis says 1 full practice in 10 days. Spin says, keep in mind, Dane was never supposed to be CB1 and going up against these wide receiver ones weekly. Pops Mafia says we better sign a defensive end this week, and we're certainly going to be getting to that in the next couple of minutes here. But, our guy Hans, he on Twitter, I think he put things, really into perspective for me last night. He put out a list of every single Buffalo Bills player that's missed a game this season. I mean, the Bills are 8-3, which is a better record than they had last season through 11 games, by the way. And they have done so without the following players, or with the following players at some point in time missing a game: Gabriel Davis, Dawson Knox, Mitch Morse, Spencer Brown, Gregory Rousseau, AJ Epinesa, Ed Oliver, Jordan Phillips, Tim Settle, Jermaine Edmonds, Matt Milano, Trey White, Dane Jackson, Christian Benford, Kyer Elam, Micah Hyde, and Jordan Poyer. We're going to talk about the coordinators tonight in a bit because, there's questions about the job performance of each of those two gentlemen. But to me, with all of these injuries, the fact that we have a better record at this point this season, playing one of the more difficult schedules in the league, this has to be one of the more admirable jobs that Sean McDermott has done this season for the Buffalo Bills during his tenure. Do you agree with that assessment?
I do, because if you think about it, and you mentioned it and you kind of led into it, the Bills in Sean McDermott's tenure really have been quite fortunate in regards to avoiding volume of injury and also significant injuries to key contributors. And obviously Trey White went out last year, but this year it's been kind of a it's been on both fronts, right? We've
Mhm.
lost significant contributors to lengthy amounts of time out. Like I would consider Tremaine Edmonds obviously in that mix as well, but obviously Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer missed ton games, like Hyde's out for the year, etc.
Mhm.
And you've had a laundry list of injuries all throughout the season. So I think that, plus, as Jessica says, a tougher schedule this year. That first stretch of the schedule between the Chiefs, Ravens,
Mhm.
Titans, Packers. I mean, I know the Packers weren't, and the people that also expected the Rams to be good as well. Like it's been a tough
Mhm.
season for this team, and here they are, 8-3, with a couple of losses, like total combined losses under 10
Mhm.
points. So it's it's really been a good job by Sean McDermott this year, and I think he's also probably now seeing that he's going to maybe have to have his hand on the pulse a little bit more on some of the like more um, like deep dive, like deeper cuts of the
Mhm.
coaching staff and the roster than maybe he's had to in years past because of these injuries.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I honestly believe in 2017 we were having these conversations because if you look at it, like our beat up defense is probably as good as our defense that brought us to the playoffs in 2017 was, that barely scripted us in the playoffs. And I feel like we were having these conversations in 2017. Obviously, not me and you. We didn't have a podcast back then, but I feel like I was having those conversations and I was seeing those conversations on social media in 2017. Like,
Mm.
should Sean McDermott take over play calling from Leslie Frazier? Is Leslie Frazier too conservative? Does Sean McDermott need to step in? You know, blah, blah, blah. And I believe there were at some points where Sean McDermott like took over play calling from Leslie Frazier in 2017. I believe you saw it a little bit in that Cleveland game where McDermott had the call sheet and like maybe even took the call sheet from Frazier for a bit. So with all of these injuries and with how sophisticated and complicated this Buffalo Bills defense is, it's all hands on deck. And I think, post game, Peter Schrager pointed this out on Good Morning Football this morning. Sean McDermott, usually a very even keeled guy. His post game reaction was very fiery and very out of character for him. You can tell how much this win meant to him with all of the obstacles the Buffalo Bills have faced in the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, and yeah, you nailed it. He nailed it. I mean, and you didn't even expect it either, right? It was like kind of like the video started. He's in the locker room and he's like talking about game all this, and then at the end he just kind of goes off, and it's like it's really funny to see. There was a really kind of funny thing I noticed about that video too, like Ken Dorsey standing in the corner just like awkwardly smiling, and I'm just like, this guy is a psychopath. Like he I'm just like, he's just like smiling in the corner. Anyway, I just thought that was funny. But yeah, fiery, and you could tell even going back to a couple plays, like maybe that Cleveland play where Dawson Knox made that first down that we talked about, and he kind of was like out at the sideline, like cheering him, signaling the first down. Like he's fired up right now, and I like that right now, actually.
Yeah, it was. I'll tell you what, I was feeling pretty low in that third quarter when Von Miller was out of the game, Deion Dawkins was out of the game. Detroit drove down to take the lead. I was feeling pretty down bad at that point. Now, I don't want to get too much into the weeds with this story because I don't want to get in trouble because I'm a married man. I'd like to stay that way. But man, I was at the in-laws, and right after Detroit scored that touchdown, my mother-in-law came out and was like, all right, pause the game, time for dinner. I had to watch the rest of that football game, and I had to sit with that Detroit, like taking the lead for about 45 minutes before I was able to go and watch the rest of the football game. And me and my wife had a conversation about it after we left because, like, listen, no offense, because my wife's not a big sports fan. She's like, you're being childish. It's a game. I don't know. If I was hosting any sort of holiday event, and Josh Clark says the same thing happened to me, and let me know in the comment sections if you disagree. If I was hosting any sort of event on a holiday and there was a big sporting event and one of the guests was a fan of that team or a regular guest of that event was a fan of that team, I would do the things around that thing. Like,
Or let them
I
be
don't
exempt
know.
from
No,
the happenings.
I wasn't about to not sit down and eat dinner with them. Like, that would be
Right.
stupid rude. But like, I mean, couldn't have made it and again, this makes me sound like an unappreciative like douchebag. Could have made dinner 3 p.m. instead of 2, like West Coast time, by the way. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's and grandma wasn't happy. Like, that's what stinks about leaving Buffalo, because maybe I am a jerk, but like I kept my cool. I went, I paused it. Every part of me inside was dying, and I went
Yes,
and
you were
ate.
dying.
But
I know you
like,
were.
but like, man, that's the one thing I miss is like I was seeing all Thursday morning people like alter and change their plans around the Bills game, and then that happened to me, and I'm like, fudge. That is why I really, that's what I really dislike about moving away from Buffalo, is the fact that not everyone loves the Bills as much as I do. Yeah, see people
How about
rearranging
this?
their plans.
I was at the in-laws and they were like, you don't even worry about watching the baby. You can watch the game.
Ooh.
Like I was like, this is a great family.
Yeah,
But they're really
and
big sports fans, though. That's I think the
yeah,
difference. Like
I'm
they're
well.
huge Packers fans, so like they get it. Like
Cardinals playing on Christmas. Maybe I offer to host and then make dinner right when the. No, I'm just kidding. And the Cardinals aren't making the
the
playoffs
season
anyway.
will be
So,
over by
like,
then.
if it's basketball on Christmas, like, who cares? It's one of 84 games or whatever, one of 88 games.
Right.
Like, if it's the Cardinals and if the Bills were out of the playoff contention, like they are most years at Thanksgiving, like before the Josh Allen era, it's whatever. But man, that was brutal. We're gonna delete this so no one in my family ever sees the last 5 minutes of the show. But let's get to some grim news here. The injury report. Von Miller. The good news: no torn ACL. The bad news: knee sprain and torn lateral meniscus. He's out at least 1 to 2 weeks. And then once the swelling goes down, they will assess how he's sort of handling the rehabilitation process. It's likely at that point he will try to play with a brace. Knowing Von Miller, he's probably going to try to play with a brace. And if he can't, he will have surgery and his season will be over. 2 years in a row, the Bills could possibly lose a player for the season on that super stiff, bad turf that nobody seems to like, especially the players. It's in New Orleans. That same turf is in Detroit. What are your thoughts on Von Miller's injury?
I mean, more significant maybe than even Trey White's injury a year ago. Like I don't know. Like it's I think what makes it hurt more is like the investment you made, and it's his first year there. And I'm not trying to downplay like what happened to Trey White last year and his injury, but like Trey White was a guy that Bills drafted. He's been with the team for multiple years. Like you've gotten a lot out of Trey White, and obviously it was very unfortunate, but like this was the year you brought in Von Miller to seal the deal, right? You brought him in to close out the games. You brought him in to close in the playoffs, and you just really hope that that turf didn't end his season, right? And you hope that whatever it is, like at this point, if you're the Bills, like, and you can get him back at the very end of the season or in the playoffs, like you're taking that right now, and you're going to be happy with it. And it doesn't matter if he's not practicing up until that game where he might have to play that first
he just plays in the game.
You just needs to play, right?
Yeah, and when we're healthy, we have the ability to where you have, when healthy, you have Groot, Epenesa, Basham, and Lawson. You could literally just use Von Miller as your designated pass rusher. He doesn't have to play. You'd like him to play, right? Obviously, you'd like him to play 50, 60% of the snaps, but even 35% of Von Miller, putting him in the clutch situations, putting him in the fourth quarter, if he is eventually able to go, is still better than nothing. So that is one of the positives of the Buffalo Bills being 5 deep at defensive end. The only problem is they're not 5 deep at defensive end right now. Roy Collins comes in saying, hoping Groot is ready for next week. Still dealing with ankle injuries, which took Ed Oliver a while. Obviously, all ankle injuries are different. Rousseau and Epenesa. So we're technically right now down to Basham and Lawson. Mike Love played. No hurries, no pressures. Kind of didn't really notice him out there in this football game. But you have Mike Love, and then you have Kingsley Jonathan available from the practice squad. Question for you, and this is sort of a curveball, oddball. This might be a totally stupid question, but over the next couple of weeks, could the Bills maybe try and turn to Kingsley Jonathan for a little bit of pass rush pop? Like, I understand why they played Mike Love in this game. They wanted the guy who knew the system, who's been here for years. They had Von Miller, all of that thing. But now you take Von Miller away. Do maybe the Buffalo Bills turn to Kingsley Jonathan, who popped a little bit in the preseason, rushing the passer, to maybe look to add a little oomph to that pass rush?
Yeah, it's a tricky situation right now on that call because you have this critical stretch of 3 games coming up, and McDermott, he's going to want the guy that has been there the whole season and has been with the team for years. But at the same time, you have to look at your roster right now and say like where we need help right now with Von Miller out, maybe it as a pass rusher, right? And that's where Kingsley Jonathan maybe could help you a little more than a guy like Mike Love could. And so the Bills have to, like, McDermott is going to have to play a very interesting game here, because he's got to look at this schedule and say, is it worth it? Is it worth the risk for me to take to bring in a guy like Kingsley Jonathan, who's a rookie and has not been with the team technically the entire season, although he was there in camp and knows the system, in a critical stretch of games coming up, on the chance that he could give me some extra pass rush pops? So that's the question you have to ask yourselves, the way whether those potential benefits outweigh the cost of just having that presence. And look, we're just talking about the fourth defensive lineman here, right? Or fifth defensive lineman here. So it's not like we're talking about a guy who's going to have to go and start and play like, 70% of the snaps or anything like that. But it's still an important move for the Bills, given how much they rotate on that line. So I'm not against it, but I would, if I was a betting man, I would say that probably wouldn't happen.
Jessica Tennis said, would love the Texans waiving Jerry Hughes and the Bills grabbing him. I don't know. Like, maybe like there could be some conversations that can be had behind closed doors. Obviously tampering is not allowed, but maybe, Jerry Hughes, who's made it clear he wants to stay in Houston because that's where he's from. That's where he sort of wants to end his career. But I mean, they're 1-8. They just switched over to Kyle Allen. Maybe he sees what's going on in Buffalo, and like, he just tells someone like on the side to reach out to Brandon Beane, see what the interest is. He's a vested veteran, so he wouldn't go through the waiver process. Maybe the Texans can work out a deal with the Texans to give him his release. And but obviously it's probably not going to happen. As Spin says, the Texans are not getting rid of Jerry Hughes. So that's probably not going to happen. But hey, it wouldn't crazier things have happened. The Miami Dolphins owner lost a bunch of draft picks and got suspended half the season for tampering with Sean Payton and Tom Brady. So wouldn't put it past some of these people. But Deion Dawkins, ankle injury, left, didn't play at all in the second half. Sean McDermott says it's day by day. My completely physician's opinion is ankle injury, left tackle. You're probably not going to see him against the Patriots. You'll probably see him wait those 7 or 17 days when we have to play the Jets to get that extra 10-day rest after the New England. So I'm not really expecting to see Deion Dawkins out there against the Patriots next Thursday night. Quessenberry came in the second half. He surrendered a sack. The offensive line in totality did not look great. Morse could be back by New England, or he should be back by New England. What are your thoughts on Deion Dawkins and the state of the offensive line right now?
I know McDermott's a day-to-day, but because of the importance of that position and how Deion relies on that athleticism, that ankle, you need that thing to be right. And mentally, he needs it to be right too, to feel like he's going to be able to play his best. It's an interesting scheduling sort of phenomenon this year with the Bills. Like, they play the Thanksgiving game, and then, oddly, they have the Thursday game again the week after, and the Patriots, the same exact scenario. So it's like, in one situation where maybe they had the 10 days, let's say, in between games, maybe you stretch and you could play like the following Sunday. But given the short turnaround here, you look at it and say, well, maybe just give him the full 2+ weeks. He only misses one game, and you get him right for the Jets and Dolphins. I think that would be like ideal. And that's only if he's dealing truly with like maybe like a low ankle sprain, or maybe he only misses a week. But I did see some medical people out there saying it could have been a high ankle sprain, and could be something where it's more of like a 3 to 4 week thing, which would obviously be awful timing given this stretch of games we have coming up. So let's hope, again, that's just one person's opinion online. Let's hope it's a lesser variety sprain, a lower sprain, and that he only maybe misses one game. And I think I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get more in depth in this on Monday, but Matthew Judon working up against guys like David Quessenberry and Spencer Brown is something that is frightening to think about. But also, I mean, he was going up against Ben Brandel in this game against Minnesota on Thursday night, and he only had 3 total pressures, 2 hits in a hurry. So Matthew Judon, even though he's having a good season, we saw him disappear late in the season last year. Let's fingers crossed that it happens again. And then finally on the injury report here, this is a late addition to the injury report. Christian Benford, an oblique injury. He and Dane Jackson were cooked all day. We're going to get into the data and the statistics later. Trey White returned, played 16 snaps. Kyer Elam returned. He was also limited. I saw a lot of people online today with the news of this Christian Benford injury calling for Rhodes, specifically calling for Rhodes to be signed to the active roster and not, and to no longer be a part of the practice squad. He's only got one practice squad call up left. But I would disagree with that. I think you can utilize one more practice squad call up for Xavier Rhodes and then make a decision. And I think over the course of the next 2 weeks, Kyer Elam and Trey White could be working themselves into the starting role that we imagine they would be playing at the start of your start of the season. So what are your thoughts on the state of this cornerback room with now Trey White coming back, being worked in slowly, Kyer Elam coming back, being worked in slowly, and Christian Benford now on his way out with a week-to-week oblique injury?
It's just like one guy comes back, another guy goes out. It's just like that's just what it feels like this year for the Bills is they just can't get everyone healthy at the same time. And I know that's like unrealistic expectation sometimes is to expect that, but it was good to see Trey and Elam back, and I think that will take a little bit of the pressure off not having Christian Benford, with this oblique injury. I also think it's probably like Dane Jackson looking around saying like, thank goodness we got some cavalry on the way, so I'm not the only one getting put under the crosshairs here. But and we're going to get to that. But I do think that it was good that Trey and Elam came back, even though it was limited action, to get the reps because that was real game reps. They got them out of there from everything, from all accounts that I saw, like no setbacks for either one of those guys, and they were fine coming out of the game. Nothing popping up for either of those guys during the game. And they should be, I would imagine, back to Trey being very close to full allotment, I would think, for this next Pats game. And Elam maybe sliding back into now a rotation maybe with Dane Jackson, whereas early in the season without Trey White, he was in that rotation with Christian Benford and Dane Jackson getting the majority of the snaps. Maybe now with Benford out, you see Elam rotate with Dane Jackson so that Elam still kind of works his way back, and then Trey White's there on the other side. I think it comes down to, honestly, how ready Trey White will be to play 100% of the snaps. Otherwise, you're probably going to see a 3-man rotation still with those 3 guys.
Yeah, 100%. All right, before we move on, and the next topic is going to be our players of the game. This show is sponsored by Picasso's Pizza, and the ads on top. There we go. Show sponsored by Picasso's Pizza. 4 great locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Buffalo Pizza since 1980. You can order online at picassospizza.net. And if you're not a towner like us, you can even get it mailed to your home. And I can tell you from experience, it's just as good as getting it fresh from the restaurant. Again, it's picassospizza.net. So you're probably not going to do any grocery shopping this weekend because you got all those Thanksgiving leftovers. Sunday night comes around, all the leftovers are gone. Call up Picasso's Pizza and order yourself a nice pie to close out your weekend and watch 7 hours of commercial-free football on Red Zone on Sunday. So nice to be able to watch Red Zone channel without all these Buffalo Bills games on Sunday this year. But let's get to our players of the game. And there were 2 that really stood out to me. And I want to start with one. It was Ed Oliver.
Yep.
Sack, safety, fumble recovery, 5 tackles, and 4 run stops. A lot of people were upset that he didn't get a turkey leg along with Tyler Bass, Stefon Diggs, and Josh Allen. Ed Oliver, definitely a player that's going to need to step up in the absence of Von Miller. What were your thoughts on his day?
He was the one that stood out to me the most on the defense. I mean, Matt Milano flashed a few times, but Ed Oliver was consistently being disruptive. It was his highest graded game of the season per PFF, a 91.1 grade in this game. He hadn't had actually per PFF's grading anything over in the 70s before this game, which we know, whatever, that's subjective, but like clearly they recognized the effort in this game as well, 91.1, and has now put him on track to be his highest graded season per PFF grading of his career. He's on track for that right now. And that game yesterday sort of exemplified that to me and his importance. And really, it's been like this for the last few weeks with him, right? And we said it last week against the Browns. He needed to step up. He did. And then, man, he really put a cap on it. And we were talking in the pregame about like, hey, he's going to be my take me higher player for 3 weeks in a row. And that was like the guy you mentioned on the defensive side. And he really did. He's an absolute monster, incredible impact on the game. And he is going to be, I think, the guy now with Von Miller out that has to be the leader and the most impactful player on that defensive line right now going forward. With Von Miller out, I don't think there's any question about it.
Yeah, Astro comes in saying, I hope Bean can find the money to re-sign Oliver in 2024. He's going to be one of the important ones coming up, along with guys like Tremaine Edmonds and Jordan Poyer. So a lot of names that the Buffalo Bills will have to talk about in the coming weeks. Yeah, I'll tell you what. I mean, you mentioned he has highest PFF grade. A lot of that had to do with his run stopping. I haven't had a chance to rewatch the game, but per PFF, he only had 2 pressures, a sack, a hit, and he only had a 4.2 pass rush win rate, which I just find hard to believe because his presence was felt in that game. Obviously, he did a lot of things in the running game. He had those 5 tackles, those 4 stops, but something tells me that PFF might need to go back and watch that game again because that just looks a little bit off to me. But again, only watch that one time. His presence was super felt in that game. The other player of the game that I had was Stefon Diggs. 8 catches, 77 yards, and a touchdown. In the fourth quarter, it was his touchdown that took the lead. It was a huge, and then he had that huge catch over the middle of the field for the game-winning field goal. I really do think it's that relationship between him and Allen that ultimately won us this football game. He kept QB1 poised, engaged, and level-headed. I loved seeing some of the things between the two of them after the touchdown and then ultimately after the game. Stefon Diggs ran off the field after that touchdown. He just kept saying, "Hey, I told you, I got you, bro." Like that was an awesome scene to see him screaming that at Josh Allen. They obviously had their meme-worthy embrace after the game-winning field goal that somebody did a really good job setting to the tune of Whitney Houston's "I Will Always Love You." So that was a good little. That was a good little like one of those little picture things where the mouth moves. And then after the game, to Tracy Wolfson of CBS, Stefon Diggs had this to say. I would say that it's not me at all. We have the best quarterback in the league. Anytime we hit a lull, it's like his eyes are locked in. He's focused. I try to be his support system, get open, catch the ball. That's my guy. I understand being a Bills fan. There's not a lot to look back to in terms of reference points, but it's hard to remember a quarterback wide receiver duo in the league with the relationship that Josh Allen and Stefon Diggs has. I think it was a really important aspect in the Buffalo Bills pulling out this win late. What were your thoughts on Stefon Diggs' day?
I mean, when they had to show up in one of the big moments of the game, the Bills put together that 14-play, 90-yard drive, and you go through the drive chart and you're like, Josh Allen to Diggs for 8, Josh Allen to Diggs for 4, Josh Allen to Diggs for 12, Josh Allen incomplete to Diggs, but roughing the passer, then the touchdown to Diggs. Like that drive, that touchdown drive was like Josh Allen and Stefon Diggs like willing the Bills to a lead on a day where they really struggled for consistency on offense. They found a way in the most important time of the game to put together a 14-play, 90-yard drive for a touchdown. And not only that, come back with 20 whatever seconds left and find one more play in you between those two to give the Bills a chance to win it in regulation. So it's like a microcosm in a way of like kind of what the season has been, right? These like inconsistencies and struggles, but like you do see those times when that connection's there, it's the best in the league. It's one of the best in the league. And so, yeah, it was a frustrating day at the start, and it pretty obvious from the body language, and no one's going to deny that. But like when it mattered most, they had each other's backs, and they both came up big for each other. And man, that relationship between the two of them, it's like a family relationship, right? If they're brothers, you're gonna quibble and bicker and whatever, but at the end of the day, like that's your family, and you love that person, and when it works, like there's no replacing it. Like you just can't replace it or replicate it. So it was pretty special.
Let's jump in now to sort of talking about Josh Allen, his day, and Ken Dorsey's day. But I want to segue into that with a tweet that really pissed me off. And that was a tweet from Sal Moriana of Rochester Democrat and Chronicle, one of the part of that old guard of reporters that sort of wallow in misery 100% of the time. And for some reason, the new guard of reporters seem to revere and inspire to replicate that old guard of old miserable reporters. But his tweet in the middle of the football game was this: Josh Allen is lost right now. He has no answers. His line is getting killed. He's rattled, and his throws are all over the place. I understand Josh wasn't having the best game. I understand a lot of things were going wrong around him, but let's never use the word Josh Allen and rattled in the same sentence again, because that is the word that got to me. Rattled is sort of like an adjective for the Zach Wilsons of the world, for the Mike Whites of the world when they're throwing 5 interceptions in a game. Josh Allen was not rattled. He was down to 2 offensive linemen. He's got an OC who's learning on the job and sort of taking his lumps, and we're going to talk about him in a minute. He's got a UCL injury that's clearly affecting certain throws that he has to make on a weekly basis. And they were 100% pressing on offense. All those things are true. But using that adjective rattled to describe his game right now lacks any regard for intelligent thought. It's just lazy and just fishing for clicks. He was 24-42 on the day for 253 yards, 2 touchdowns, a pick. He had 10 carries, 78 yards, and a touchdown on the ground. What were your thoughts on Josh Allen's game? Was he rattled?
No, he wasn't rattled. I mean, like there were some drops in there too. Let's not forget. I mean,
Yeah.
there are a lot of factors into sort of what have gone into Josh Allen's struggles over the last couple of weeks. And again, we say the word struggles, and we say the word, we say this as an objective criticism, but it's also got to be compared to what our expectations are of Josh Allen, which are astronomically high, right? Like, I mean, Bills fans, we like expectations are so high for Josh Allen because what he's capable of doing on week in and week out basis, and the consistency that he's shown really over the last 3 years, it's spoiled us. It really has. We went from one extreme of not having quarterbacks for 20 years, a quarterback for 20 years that like we've had okay ones here and there, but like to like possibly the best quarterback we've ever had talent wise, and possibly the best quarterback we ever will have as a franchise. And we've become so spoiled that our expectations are so high of him that even when he has a game statistically that we would have killed for 6-7 years ago from our quarterback, we hold him to this standard that is just incredibly high. And to his credit, he holds himself to the same standard, and he expects that perfection too. So look, I mean, some things I agree with Sal, others I don't. On this particular point, I don't like that the use of that word. Obviously, he's trying to get clicks, and like we're talking about it, so I guess it worked. But I wouldn't say he's rattled. I think he's just, between the some of the play calling, the injury drops. There's a lot that goes into it, and rattled would not be the word at all that I would use to describe.
Yeah, I mean, the Bills' offense looked like a simulation at the beginning of the year. It looked like they were playing Madden on easy mode. Now it looks like they're playing NFL football against NFL teams, and they certainly aren't perfect in their pressing. And we're going to talk about Ken Dorsey in a moment, but like, man, let's just never use the word Josh Allen and rattled in the same sentence again. Before we get to Ken Dorsey, I want to talk about that UCL injury where, it seemed like maybe it was past him. He like wasn't on the injury report last week, but he was limited all week this week. We saw him without the brace on in practice, but then it looked like he might have had the brace on again in this game. Tony Romo on the broadcast mentioned the UCL injury. It seemed like 100 times. He used as an excuse for Josh Allen what seemed like 100 times. And, I almost feel like someone from the Buffalo Bills or someone from Josh Allen's camp sort of fed Romo that narrative and asked him to hammer it home. I mean, 32 million people watched that football game. And it does look like maybe the UCL injury is clearly bugging him. People are like, well, did you see that bullet he threw over the middle of the field to Stefon Diggs to win the game? He's fine. Yes, it seems like on those deep shots and those balls over the middle of the field, he is fine. But I have noticed that some of those sidearm throws he has to make, and it was mentioned on the broadcast last week, and some of those throws to the sideline in the short area that he has to make, they're off. And he's never been perfect at them, but they're off. Those throws that are sort of an extension of the run game where Stefon Diggs sort of comes back to the ball, him and Stefon Diggs missed on that like 3 or 4 times in that game, where it would have set up like a 2nd and 3 as opposed to a 2nd and 10. So the Bills were putting themselves in down and distance situations. So he seemed to struggle on some of those extension of the run game and those screen type of throws. What are your thoughts on Josh Allen's elbow? Do you think that maybe somebody from the Bills or Josh Allen's camp fed Tony Romo that line? And do you think that elbow really is still affecting him?
First, conspiracy theory judge is my favorite judge. Look, I mean, I don't know, maybe, but with as many eyeballs around the game, Romo saving up for the national media Christmas, it's a theory. It's a theory. He is clearly hurt. I agree with Astro. He is still clearly hurt. It's obvious. The one that kind of stood out to me was a throw, I think, to the right sideline. The Bills were moving right to left on the broadcast, and he just airmailed McKenzie. Like, he was wide open. It would have been like a 15-yard play, like wide open. And he just like would have gotten yards after the catch, everything. He just sailed it out of bounds, like high. And so like I have noticed that, and it does seem to be more of a factor on the shorter throws. And I wonder if like that combined with the fact that he has thrown some interceptions, the interception at the end of the Vikings game, it's like there's a mental element to this as well. It's probably a little bit of a combination of the mental and the physical. But clearly not having the full physical is going to affect the mental as well. So, and Pop says elbow is affected on sidearm throws with long step. Yeah, I mean, he looks okay on the long ones. The touch throws where it's like a little bit sidearm. Yeah, that's, I mean, everyone's kind of nailing this in the comment section. I agree. Which is kind of crappy because like that's what we kind of were asking for more of from him, right? It's like some of these like safer, like check down type throws. And Spin says Romo described it as he has to throw through the pain, it's affecting his throws, and key situations he'll fight through and deliver the ball.
You certainly did.
And adrenaline will take over in a lot of cases, but that's something hopefully he can manage through, and it will get, a little bit better each week as we get closer to towards the end of the season.
Let's talk about Ken Dorsey a little bit. And there was a really good tweet from Anthony Prohaska, one of our fellow content creators here at Cover One. He dug up the data on DVOA and compared the Bills DVOA on offense through 11 weeks. Obviously, the Detroit game can't factor into it because all games need to be played for DVOA purposes. But he compared the Bills offense through 11 weeks to the Bills offense in totality last year. Bills offensive DVOA so far this season, 6th overall. It was 10th in 2021, so it's better. Bills passing DVOA this season, 3rd overall. It was 13th in 2021, so that's better. The Bills rushing DVOA, 19th overall right now. It was 9th in 2021. And a lot of that came later on in the season when the Bills finally started to make some strides in the running game. Here's the big ones. Bills red zone DVOA, currently 28th in the league. They were 4th in 2021. Their red zone passing DVOA, 28th. They were 12th in 2021. And currently the Bills sit at 26th in red zone rushing DVOA. They were 4th in 2021. To me, my sort of layman synopsis of this Bills offense right now, Ken Dorsey is way too predictable and way too reliant on Josh Allen just making plays off script. This offense looks way more comfortable when running 2-minute drills, just trying to collect chunk plays, than it does when it's on script. What are your thoughts on Ken Dorsey through the first 11 games of the season?
Eric pointed this out that the Bills are being quite vanilla. They're not changing up their, schematics from the first halves to second halves. I've seen some people online mentioning like Ken Dorsey needing to get back to basics. And it's like, well, like that, I think it needs to be the opposite of that. Like, honestly, like it's almost too basic and so vanilla that like, there's not any creativity. Like, I shouldn't say any, but there's very, very little creativity. And like, you watch even teams like the Vikings last night with Kevin O'Connell, and they come up with some of these fun plays to Jefferson. And you see this even with, teams with quarterbacks not even in the realm of Josh Allen trying things like this. Ralph says, I want Dorsey on the sideline. I don't know that he's regressed since the beginning of the season. I think it's just that like Josh Allen and the personnel is so good that even things we don't see, like that are obvious, like that could be obvious, like recycling of the same plays or not having like a great schematic way to like get guys open. Like maybe it's mad a bit by what Josh Allen and this personnel can do. So I was getting frustrated yesterday, mostly with the lack of, just getting some touches for Dawson Knox. Like, I don't want to hear that Dawson Knox is blanketed. I don't want to hear that he's being well covered. Like, you can find gimmies with Josh Allen to get Dawson Knox involved in the game. Like, you can find gimmies. Like, it might not be 20-yard plays, but you can find a gimme for Dawson Knox for 6 or 7 yards.
Yeah.
Don't tell me you can't.
Scheming people open, getting the ball in their hand, utilizing motion more. Like, those are some of the things you can do to get the ball in the hands of like some of your slot weapons, because, Roy comes in and says, we have slot receivers, getting the hands in some of these guys, just to build up their confidence and to get other people involved in the offense. I totally agree with you there. Let's talk now about the drive of the game. And I had to tie two drives together here. I don't think you obviously don't have one without the other, but the first was 15 plays, 82 yards, took 6 minutes and 19 seconds off the clock, and it ended in a Stefon Diggs go-ahead touchdown, coupled with the very next offensive series, 4 plays, 48 yards, 12 seconds, and ended in a Tyler Bass game-winning field goal. Obviously, the highlight of that drive was Josh Allen's absolute piss missile over the middle of the field to Stefon Diggs to put the Buffalo Bills in field goal range. What were your thoughts on the Buffalo Bills heroics to sort of end this football game?
On one hand, it never should have come down to that. On the other hand, I kind of felt a little fortunate that they did have the chance to win it at the end there. Jared Goff missed a looked to be wide open DJ Chark down the right sideline on the drive before, and that could have given the Lions a touchdown lead. Basically, the Bills would have had to go down and score a touchdown with 20 seconds, which probably wouldn't have happened. So, I thought Sal Paccio made a pretty interesting point on Twitter about like, had the Bills not missed the extra point early in the game, maybe the Lions would have been more aggressive on that drive, knowing they needed a touchdown, but they played a little bit more conservatively, knowing that they just needed a field goal. And then Michael Badgley, who had missed a kick earlier in the game and who I kind of took some shots at in the pregame, as having that Chargers sting still on him, like ended up coming in clutch. It was pretty like ridiculous, honestly, that kick was like going wide right, obviously, and then somehow drew back in. Like, where was that in 1990? But let me get back to this game. The heroics were impressive. When there was 23 seconds left, I was like, well, we have 3 timeouts. It's only going to really take us maybe 3 to 4 plays to get into field goal range. And with those timeouts, like, this offense could do it. The fact is that where was your confidence level that they could, right? At that point in time, they had just had the nice drive. So maybe your confidence level was a little higher at that point, but man, impressive, good use of the timeouts. I thought the play calling, sending Josh on a couple of those runs was okay, right? Getting him a little bit closer, not taking any chances for a sack or negative play. So I didn't really have any issues with the play calling there at the end. And obviously Bass delivered, which was the second kick I thought he had missed that game. I thought he had missed an extra point earlier. They said it was good. And I actually thought he had hooked that one left and it actually snuck in. So man, got it done.
Yeah. I the moment said that pass was the story of the game. Lights out. Our guy, Uber Hansen, he always is on top of the sort of fun statistics. On Twitter this morning, he tweeted, so just how fast did Josh Allen throw this football? The ball traveled 45.1 air yards in 1.566 seconds. That means Josh Allen threw the football 58.91 miles per hour. On Kyle Brandt's basement this week, Kyle Brandt asked him on his touchdown throw to Stefon Diggs last week, was that a 10? He said, no, it was more like an 8 or a 9. And Kyle Brandt asked him, like, you ever throw the 10? And Josh Allen says, very rarely do I throw a 10, like use 10 arm strength. If that wasn't his 10, holy yikes, I would like to see what his 10 is, because that thing was an absolute missile. Also, shout out to the Detroit Lions for trying to throw the ball with Jared Goff on their own goal line. That also helped the Bills out quite a ton. That was fun. Every time they were dropping back to pass, I was just like, I'm pretty sure their offensive coordinator Ben Johnson. I'm like, you're smarter than this. Like, what are you doing? Jared Goff is an absolute statue. Why are we doing this? But thank you, we appreciate it here in Buffalo. But yeah, this game must sting for Lions fans, because that was kudos to Lions. The Lions team is fun. They're easy to root for. They're gonna be my NFC team for years to come.
They're a likable
they're a
team, in
fun
my
team.
opinion. Like
Super likable,
I
yeah.
like them. I like them. I mean, they're scrappy. Had 3 wins in a row. Like Kyle Knapp does that really fun graphic with like my top 5 not so bad teams, and like the Lions are on. Like they're not a bad team. Like they've lost a couple close games this year. Like they have some good players. They do. They battle injuries too, just like the Bills have.
I got 3 stats of the game today, and they are all negative, so buckle up, people. I'm going to start with one that you've already mentioned. Dawson Knox, 2 catches, 17 yards. Backup tight ends around the league have a higher percentage of teams' target shares than Dawson Knox. They're paying him $14 million. This is, to me, unacceptable. What were your thoughts on his day and his usage?
I mean, I pretty much already went to it. Like, you got to find a way to get this guy the ball. Like, obviously he made that really nice catch on the great throw by Allen, the floater down on the near side broadcast view, going left to right towards the end of the game on that, that big long drive the Bills had. So like the plays are there for him, as far as like his ability hasn't gone anywhere, but like you've got to find a way to get him involved. And if you're an offense that's struggling to find consistency outside of Stefon Diggs, like, look to this guy. I mean, he has shown that he can make the plays when called upon. He has shown that he can get some yards after catch. He can be physical. He can be a threat in the red zone. Like, I just find it hard to believe that you can't find a way to get this guy more involved. And like, comparing him to like a guy like George Kittle early in the season, who the 49ers weren't really utilizing a ton because they were using him as a blocker mostly. And it wasn't, it's not even just that, right? It's like, okay, like, you're not even really just using him as a blocker. Like, he's running routes, right? Yeah. But you're not giving him and putting him in position to where he can be a primary option. So that was one of my biggest gripes of the game. I hope that, knowing his success he had in that playoff game against the Pats last year, maybe he comes out with a little bit more fire, and Dorsey comes out with a little bit more conscious effort to get him involved in this Pats game. But certainly, like, if you're talking about dollars efficiency for what you're getting out of him, like, you're not. And I actually don't blame a lot of it on Dawson Knox himself, right? Like, so it's not a knock on Dawson Knox to me. I think it's a play calling and schematic issue.
Yeah, a lot of people coming in saying he has to block to help our offensive tackles. He was going out into catch plenty. Like, he's a good blocking tight end, but you don't pay blocking tight ends $14 million. Like, cool. It's nice to make excuses for him. It's nice that he has more of an all-around game, but you have to contribute more when you're being paid $14 million. On top of being an excellent blocker, you have to be Josh Allen's safety blanket, and you have to be a threat in the red zone. He doesn't need to be Travis Kelce, but he needs to be all 3 of those things every single week to live up to that contract. And I'm not even saying it's his fault. If he's not doing those, if he's not getting the opportunity to do those 3 things, then it's back to Ken Dorsey in square one, what we were talking about. So it's out here saying he had 45 true pass snaps. Yep. So he's on the field for 45 passing snaps, meaning he wasn't asked to block.
So 90% out there for route percentage.
He was 90%. So 90% of the time he was out in the field, he ran a route. So, and his pass blocking grade was 29.7. So we're not going to talk about that one. I don't really trust PFF's grades. So we won't get into that. Even though let's pull up his run blocking grade just out of pure curiosity here. His run blocking grade was a 53.9. He had 4 run blocks. So I don't really look too much into, or he had 14 plays where he was blocking on runs. So I don't look too much into their grading system. I look more at their raw data. It's a little bit more difficult. Run blocking, you have to watch the film more so than rely on the analytics of PFF. But Dan Brown comes in, said that for the super chat, Appreciate the super chat. Danny says, hey guys, good to see you again. As banged up as we are, it was good to tough it out. Goal to be healthy come playoff time. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Are we taking playoff for granted now too? Because we have 3 huge games coming up. We're still extremely banged up now without Deion Dawkins for maybe a few weeks and without Von Miller now for the next significant stretch. So we might be talking. I believe in this football team. I believe we're going to make the playoffs, but it's definitely not a guarantee. But yes, I put you can speak, and then I'm going to talk about a tweet that I put out too as well today about getting healthy.
It's not a guarantee, but you start taking a look at the AFC conference in general, and obviously now 7 teams make the playoffs. Like you look at the teams, the top 7 teams right now. Obviously, the Bills are 8-3 because they've played already, but the Titans 7-3, Ravens 7-3, Miami 7-3. Those are like, if Miami wins this week, they'll be back on top of the division. But then you go to the 6th, 7th, 8th teams, and you got the 6-4 Bengals, the 6-4 Jets, the 6-5 Pats, and you've got the 5-5 Chargers. So the Jets look to be probably in a free fall right now. I mean, 6-4, like I don't see them being a true playoff threat at the moment. The Bengals looked like they are somewhat rounding into form, but they just lost Joe Mixon for this week, and they're still a little bit of a Jekyll and Hyde team. I know they've been playing better lately, and Joe Burrow has been playing really well, but not sure if they're getting Jamar Chase back or not this week or what. But and then the Pats at 6-5, so like that's getting you down to like the 8th team. So I still really don't see without an epic collapse, right? I don't think the Bills are in any real danger of missing out on the playoffs completely, at least at this point.
Yeah, and my tweet today was this: like, if the Buffalo Bills can get healthy and they can clinch a playoff berth, whether it's the 1 seed or it's the 7 seed, I don't care. Just get there. At this point, the way the injury bug and everything has been hitting us, just get there. This could be our defense for the playoffs if we can get healthy and we can get on track. Von Miller comes back for the playoffs. Miller, Oliver, Jones, and Rousseau. Rousseau can get healthy. Milano and Edmonds. Edmonds should be back this week. Trey White, Kyer Elam as your boundary corners, with Teron Johnson on the inside, Poyer and Hamlin. Solidifying those 5 guys should make life easier for Teron Johnson, who's been struggling. And I think a lot of his struggles come from the fact that some of these boundary guys have just really been bad and been getting beaten. And it's putting a lot of pressure on, on Teron in the nickel. And then a lot of people in the comment section were like, my God. I'm not too sure about that, but that would be nice as well if he could get back for the playoffs, but I'm not counting on that. That'll just be a nice little pleasant surprise if it does happen. Another super chat coming in from Carl T. Carl says, who will be inactive versus the Pats? Vaughn is out for sure. Do you think Groot, Morse, Dawkins, Edmonds, and Epinesa will all be playing? So glad to see Trey. Dave, take a guess for each of these guys.
I would say Groot, no. I think they're gonna want him maybe back. Yeah, just give him that extra. I said so for Groot and Dawkins, I kind of put in the same boat. Give him that full 17-day break. And Dawkins, we don't know, could be even longer. But I think Groot, that one extra game could do wonders for him. I expect Morse will be back this week.
Yeah.
And it's already been, at least from what I've seen, the murmurs are that Edmund will be back. I don't think Epinesa will be back.
Yeah.
I think Epinesa was dubbed as a week to week, and so I don't think he'll be back.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. I'm going to say no on Groot, yes on Morse, no on Dawkins, yes on Edmonds, no on AJ Epinesa, meaning our 4 defensive ends against the New England Patriots are going to be Shaq Lawson, Boogie Basham, Mike Love, and Kingsley Jonathan, which is something that we'll talk about on Monday night when more injury reports come out and, more things become available. And it'll be interesting to see too, now that they're off of this turf and everything, week 2, how many snaps Trey White gets, and now Kyer Elam with Christian Benford out and with Christian Benford and Dane Jackson both sucking, how much better or how much more snaps Kyer Elam and Trey White will get. And that was my last really sad statistic, really negative statistic for the game. Dane Jackson was targeted 9 times, gave up 6 receptions for 76 yards, 6 first downs, and a touchdown. Absolutely brutalized for the second week in a row. Christian Benford was targeted 3 times. There were 3 completions against him for 53 yards and 3 first downs. Amon-Ra St. Brown was targeted 10 times, had 9 receptions for 122 yards, 7 first downs, and a touchdown. Of those 9 catches, 1 of them was on Teron Johnson for 1 yard and a touchdown. 3 of them were on Christian Benford for 52 yards and 3 first downs. And 3 of them were on Dane Jackson for 47 yards and 3 first downs. So Jackson and Benford were brutalized on the boundaries. Amon-Ra St. Brown absolutely went off on this football team, on this secondary. Trey White, 16 snaps, wasn't targeted. Kyrie Elam was targeted once. Pass was incomplete. So really not much to judge those 2 on in their limited action. What were your thoughts on the Bills corners versus Detroit? I mean, it was ugly.
It wasn't good. Dane Jackson's been struggling, I think, for a couple weeks now. And I know even within cover 1, we have a lot of people who will come to his defense and kind of say, like, look, he stepped in as the CB1. He's a 6th round pick. He's like, maybe the expectations are too high for him. But as Connor says, it's not fair to put Dane Jackson in that spot. But at the end of the day, he has been taken to the woodshed, as Richard says. And like, whether he was drafted in the 6th round or the 1st round, or whether it was fair or not that he's in that spot, he is in that spot and he hasn't played well. And maybe that's a factor because he wasn't the most gifted guy physically, or maybe it's a factor of like, how the Bills are running whatever it is. Like he just, he just hasn't been as disruptive as maybe we would have hoped. And his ball skills are leaving something to be desired. I think that's another thing too, is like, he's had a couple interceptions in his career. He's had some nice plays on the ball in his career. So it's not like it's been a struggle 100% of the time for him. But for whatever reason this year, like he's really struggling at the point of attack in most situations. He is making plays here and there, but I think objectively you'd have to look at it and say, like, taking the draft status out of it, taking what position he's been put in out of it, like he hasn't been that great. And it's not fair that he's in that position as a CB 3 or 4. Cool. I'm good with that. Like, or even as a CB2, if he gets the Levi Wallace treatment, right? Like that's still not bad, but wide receiver 1s have not been kind to Dane Jackson the last few weeks.
Yeah, some damning statistics. Charles G comes in, says a lot of that came on the play action. When he was kept clean, Jared Goff was 21 of 28 for 220 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Absolutely brutalized this team when the pressure didn't get there. When he was under pressure in this football game, Jared Goff was 2 for 9 for 20 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. He had a 22.2% completion percentage. You need to pressure guys like Jared Goff, and the Buffalo Bills just did not do that. When he was blitzed in this game, Jared Goff, he went 10 of 17 for 77 yards and 2 touchdowns, because the blitzes for the Buffalo Bills, they're not getting there. Like the Buffalo Bills do not look comfortable when they blitz. They make it look super obvious, and that blitz just does not get there. It is not getting home. I mean, Jared Goff cooked them. In play action, 10 for 14 for 128 yards, 2 touchdowns. Literally all of Jared Goff's best work came out of the play action. So Charles G was spot on in his observation there. Jared Goff cooked us on the play action because the play action slows down the pass rush and it lets those DBs get eaten alive. So Jared Goff had a big day when he wasn't pressured and when he was blitzed, because the blitz never got there, and when they ran play action. So just a little look into Jared Goff's day there. All right. As we close things out here this evening, Dave, what were some other positives from this game that you took away outside of some of the things that we have talked about thus far?
I think Devin Singletary ran well again in this game. Obviously, James Cook was, pretty much absent in this game, and Singletary shouldered the load, 14 carries for 72 yards, 5.1 a clip, had the long of 19. I thought he looked well. He looked really good again. I thought for just coming back to the team and kind of reestablishing himself.
Mhm.
AJ Klein playing 100% of the snaps in this game was pretty impressive, and I thought he acquitted himself pretty well. And really, the last 2 weeks, I would say the run D
Mhm.
has really been a lot better. I mean, we saw and complained about how they played against the Packers and Vikings. But in reality, the last 2 weeks against two pretty good running teams, the Browns and the Lions, this run D has been pretty solid.
Mhm.
Held the Lions to under 100 rushing yards, held Jamal Williams to 3.7 a clip. And for the last 2 weeks, the run D has been really well. And so the interior defensive line, especially Settle, has been making plays as well. Tim Settle.
Mhm.
So the middle of that defensive line, I think, was really a positive for me in this game and really the last couple games.
Yeah, Dan Van K comes in, says the GOAT AJ Klein. I had AJ Klein on my list, 9 tackles and really no big pass plays allowed. He allowed 4 completions on all 4 of the passes thrown his way, but not a lot of yak, not a lot of big plays. AJ Klein stepped in and was a massive upgrade over Tyrell Dodson. He looked great. Isaiah McKenzie, really barely talked about him. 6 for 96 and a touchdown. We talked about it in the pregame. He has success against man coverage, and he cooked against some of those man coverages and really bailed Josh Allen out with his 6 for 96 and a touchdown. Jordan Poyer had 10 tackles. Daquan Jones, 6 tackles and a sack. How about some negatives? What were some negatives you had in this football game? I know someone here says they didn't think Hamlin had a very good day.
He had an off day, missed tackle on that one play
Mhm.
down the sideline. Obviously, probably shouldn't have gotten to that point, but maybe not his best day. Offensive line situation doesn't look great right now. Josh under duress a bit more than you'd like to see. Really hope guys like Morse and Dawkins, Dawkins might be out this week, but hope he's not out for much longer than that. And we can get this line back to being average or above average would be okay with me. And then just the obvious, right, which is like the lack of James Cook usage after coming off his probably his best game of his career. I know Singletary ran well, and a lot of this comes down to the Bills didn't have as much possession in this game because of the Lions being able to move the ball and such. But it's kind of hard to figure out what the Bills' identity is with these running backs at the moment. Naheem Hines still not being involved in the offense is a little bit of it's more of an annoyance than anything. I wouldn't say it's keeping me up at night, but it is kind of annoying. So that the running back situation and kind of how they want to use guys week to week, I guess, is really just that. It's becoming week to week. And, but for drafting a guy in the second round and trading for a guy, you'd like to maybe see guys like Cook and Hines get a little bit more run.
And let me know too, if you notice this, it seems like Allen and Cook seem to be off sync in the passing game. Whenever Allen tries to throw a screen to him, he almost seems to overthrow it or underthrow it. And then, there was that almost interception when James Cook curled one way and it looked like Josh Allen wanted him to curl another way. Those two seem off sync, which is unfortunate because James Cook is a guy you want to get the ball in his hands. You can't get the ball in his hands enough. Receivers outside of Diggs obviously struggle to get open quickly, adjust when the play breaks down. Eric Turner did a great job of explaining. Those are some of Emmanuel Sanders and Cole Beasley's strengths. They were veterans. They got open quick. They adjusted when the play broke down. They were really good in the scramble drill. All those things benefited Josh Allen. Now, Isaiah McKenzie popped off on the stat sheet. Gabriel Davis was a little pedestrian. Khalil Shakir not even getting a target. And this is a bad Detroit secondary. I was expecting more. Obviously, Diggs put up good box score numbers. McKenzie put up good box score numbers. I was expecting more theatrics from the passing game today against these really bad Detroit corners and this not so great Detroit secondary, and it just didn't happen.
Yeah, for as good as we looked in kind of calling out what McKenzie could do in this game and thinking that the Bills could have some success there, we both had Gabe Davis as our take me higher player of the game, and he really was a non-factor in this game for the most part. So Mike says, I'm hoping for a big rebound for some players, no practice time this past week. So look, we know Gabe Davis is not an efficient receiver, but we thought this was a really good matchup for him, and it just didn't materialize. I still don't think it was a bad call to say it was a good matchup for him because it clearly was, but it just didn't materialize. So Yeah, that was one that I kind of was hoping for a little bit more.
Yeah, Richard Foreman's coming in saying, we have the guys in this team to do what we need to do. I want to see Dorsey's play calling evolve a little bit. Yeah. Motion, we talked about earlier in the show, and you mentioned just drawing things up, scheming guys open, which is something that it seems like the Buffalo Bills don't do a lot of. It's a staple of offenses like Shanahan. It's a staple of offenses like McVay, scheming guys open. It doesn't seem like the Buffalo Bills really have a plan of attack to get the ball into certain people's hands to get them touches. It's more Josh Allen drops back, reads the defense, goes through his progressions, and then gets the ball. It seems like when we're scheming things to people, it's oftentimes like to Stefon Diggs or the occasional screen to McKenzie, et cetera. So I think the Ken Dorsey can certainly do a better job getting the ball into the hands of some of these weapons the Buffalo Bills have on offense. I don't think our skill position is bare. I do think a lot of these guys are being underutilized. The last negative I had was Boogie Basham. And I'm not even saying Boogie Basham is bad, but he had 0 pressures, a 3.6% win rate per PFF. He's a rotational edge. And this team is going to need more than a rotational edge in the next few weeks with Von Miller out and Groot coming off of an ankle sprain. He needs to take his game to another level. He's certainly not what the Buffalo Bills were expecting when they invested a second-round pick in him. If what he's doing is what they expected, they wasted a second-round pick because he's playing like a mid-rounder, a rotational defensive end. Both him and Epinesa were not body type fits. They had to transform their body, and now they are rotational defensive ends. They're not what you expect when you invest a second-round pick in a defensive end. They both have time to turn that around and to change that. And I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying they're rotational, and they do need to, as Mike H says, step up. I feel like, and I've seen this like 15 times on Twitter today, I feel like Boogie Basham over Creed Humphrey is going to be the new Terrell Troop over Gronk and the new TJ Graham over Russell Wilson, because every time I mentioned Boogie Basham on social media today, that was commented at least 15 times on each post. We could have had Creed Humphrey. What are your thoughts on Boogie Basham and just the him and Epinesa being very average for second-round picks?
Yeah, and what makes the Basham thing even more kind of a tougher to swallow is you just drafted Gregory Rousseau in the first round. So you literally went back-to-back defensive ends.
Yeah.
And you could have had Creed Humphrey. Like, obviously hindsight's 2020 and it's easy to say that, but like, we were all big Creed Humphrey fans. Everyone in this comment section, from what I recall, was big Creed Humphrey fans. We were on that, and then they went back to back. And I liked Boogie Basham as a prospect. Don't get me wrong, I did. But when you've already drafted Gregory Rousseau, like, obviously now we can look and say would have liked to see more contribution from him if you were that high in him to the point where you were willing to take back-to-back defensive ends. You should be getting a little bit more out of him. And AJ Epinesa, obviously, that was the year the Bills didn't have a first-round pick because they got Stefon Diggs in the trade. But there were other players at that time that I thought, I mean, I know he's hurt right now, but I will always say I wanted J.K. Dobbins with that pick. And
he wouldn't have been hurt if he was playing here.
Well, I don't know. Walter's funny one here is kind of a zinger. In McBean era, we don't call players busts, we call them second-round picks. Cody Ford, another one. But
this is a great comment. This is exactly how I feel. Astro, I think, just summed it up perfectly. I have no faith in Epinesa or Basham to ever be more than backups. I don't see those two ever being starters for this football team. They're never going to be more than DE3 and DE4. And we spent, 2 second-round picks on them. 2 second-round picks on, and even if they're good rotational ends, they're rotational ends. They're not Gregory Rousseau, and they're not Von Miller, and it's tough to be those things because they're first-round picks, but they should be better if they're second-round picks. They should be starters, or we should be talking about them like, I can't wait to see what AJ Epinesa can do in 2 years when Von Miller is gone. We're not having those conversations about them. We're just like, yeah, they're cool. They're fine. They're good wave defensive ends. Like, I have no faith in either of these guys to be starters for this football team. But I'll tell you what, Boogie Basham's got a 3-4 week window here to really step up. It's unfortunate for AJ Epinesa that he's hurt. And even when he comes back from that ankle sprain, he's probably still going to be limited. And he's not going to be himself on 100%. Rousseau's not going to be either. So it's up to Boogie and it's up to Shaq right now.
Big moment for Boogie right here. I mean,
Big
Shaq's done his thing, right? Yeah. Like, we know what he is, but this is Boogie's time to say, hey, I belong in this league and I could potentially be a starter in this league or more than a rotational player.
And spin comes in because I think scouting did a great job on Groot and Oliver. They did. They drafted 2 freaks. And then in the second round, they drafted 280-pound defensive linemen that they asked to lose 30 pounds. Like, so weird. And yeah, Charles G says, acting like you can get an impact edge rusher with any pick. Second rounders, dude. Like, second rounders where we could have had other positions that could have been helping this football team. You could have gotten rotational edge rushers that are contributing what AJ Epinesa and contributing what Boogie Basham did with different resources, with third round picks, with fourth round picks, with fifth round picks, veterans in free agency on not such back-breaking deals. Like, they could have gotten those. What Epinesa and Basham are giving them is not second round contribution. It's contribution that you could get from other places where you invest way less capital, and they could have used that capital on other things. And that's what's disappointing. So that's what I'm getting at. Like, but you're 100% right. You can't just find good pass rushers anywhere. That's why all the good ones go early in the draft, and you have to spend a ton of money like we did on Von Miller in free agency. I'm not disregarding what you're saying there, but I am saying what they're getting from those two, which they invested second round picks in, they could have gotten from a number of other places using less resources. All right. Final thoughts here on Lions had a great third round lineman that wreaked havoc on us. I have the stat. I didn't use the stat. Where was it? John Comiskey with a club on his hand had 8 pressures and 6 hurries and 2 sacks versus the Buffalo Bills. And practice squad call up James Houston. He had 2 sacks on Josh Allen in this game. So the Lions free agents off the street and John Comiskey and practice squad call-ups had a bigger day. Obviously, they weren't going up against Taylor Decker and Penei Sewell, so I'm letting my frustration show here. But here's one question before we go out of here. When Deion Dawkins is healthy, Spencer Brown in this game, I have that stat here somewhere. Spencer Brown, 6 pressures, 4 hurries, 1 QB hit, 1 sack. He had a really bad game. He had a really bad game last week. If things don't turn around for Spencer Brown when Deion Dawkins is healthy, do you consider starting David Quessenberry at right tackle?
100%. I do. Yeah. I mean, I would have no qualms about it. Like, if you think if it's going to stop the bleeding, right? Like, I'm not sitting here saying like they've been sitting on David Quessenberry as some like all world answer to their problems just out of spite because they drafted Spencer Brown in the 3rd round. Like, that's not what I'm saying, but I am saying if like he's not going to let up 6 pressures a game and get your quarterback in harm's way a little bit better than what Spencer Brown is giving you, then yeah, I would do that. I would, like, you owe it to your team to at least try if you're Sean McDermott. If Spencer Brown continues to play this badly, for sure.
Yeah. I'm with you. And looking to the offseason, the only 2 players that should have their jobs secure for next season, at least their starting job secure, are probably Deion Dawkins and Mitch Morse. Saffold probably won't be back. I don't think you should guarantee Bates a starting job next year. He is paid a decent chunk of change, like $4 or $5 million, but he can easily be a 3 backup, part of the rotation. And Spencer Brown shouldn't be promised a starting job next year either. So left guard, right tackle, all of those positions, the Buffalo Bills should look to bring in competition or to upgrade this offseason, because this offensive line just is not getting the job done right now. Like 19th in DVOA rushing, like they got to get better. And Carl T coming with a great comment. You know, the Bills have been riddled with injuries this year. Guys like Hamlin have stepped up. They seized the moment. They played well. Whereas guys like Jaquan Johnson fell on their face. It's a good opportunity to see which way Boogie Basham goes these next few games. And then Mike Hartle comes in and says, Bean had Boogie graded so much higher than anyone else at the time. I'll tell you what, I do not, and I hardly ever criticize Brandon Bean because I like Brandon Bean. I love the job he's doing here. I don't like the way he talked about that draft in the aftermath. And I don't know if you remember this, but the Bills are so meticulous in their process and the way they interview guys and they get to know guys, et cetera, for the most part. Matt Ariza getting past them aside. It almost seemed like Brandon Bean was just like, he almost treats the COVID draft like a throwaway draft. Like the way he's talked about it, the way he talked about just like throwing picks away at the end and throwing, darts at a board, etc. I don't like the verbiage he's used regarding that draft. That's always rubbed me the wrong way, but he's done a good job. The Bills are good. That's just one thing that's bugged me over the last couple of years. So while we're on the conversation of draft picks here, any final thoughts before we head out of here, Dave?
Yeah, look, I mean, at the end of the day, we were fairly, we were critical at moments in this show, but we're doing this because we're trying to talk about this objectively, what we think are the issues with this team. I don't think in any way we're saying this team's not capable of great things. So I just be clear about that. I think we're just trying to like see what it is for what it is, see what this team is, what it is right now, and try to make sense of it, try to see where they can improve, try to think about ways that this roster can be, shuffled around a bit, like things like the Quessenberry conversation over Spencer Brown, like what types of things like that we can do. And I know the Bills have just won 2 games in 5 days, so it's hard to be upset, which we shouldn't be. They're 8-3 and they're right there, but these are 3 really important games coming up. And so trying to be as objective as possible. And Roy says you also doing your normal show Monday. Yeah, we are going to do the show Monday. We're not going to do the show Thursday as like a normal pregame. We'll do like a preview show on Monday for this game. Yeah,
so we'll be doing our Patriots pregame on Monday at 9 p.m. as opposed to typically doing it before. Both of us are just busy on Thursday night, so unfortunately, we won't have a chance to break down the inactives or anything like that. Maybe we can get some cover on people either on a Twitter space or here on YouTube to talk when the inactive list comes out. But our pregame show will be Monday at 9 p.m. as opposed to pregame. Heather Smith comes in and says, met Ryan Bates' aunt and uncle at a Bills bar in San Francisco a couple weeks ago. Super cool. It's always cool to see like parents of players and stuff like that. Wyatt Teller's mom, huge fan of the Air Raid Hour. She was a big fan. Remember that, Dave? Back in our infancy, Wyatt Teller's mom was definitely one of our 7 listeners. I'm impressed with my Ryan Bates knowledge. Thought of you, Judge. Thank you so much. That's what we're here for. This is why we do what we do. And Ryan Bates has been a little disappointing this year, but maybe we can surround him with some talent. I still have faith that Ryan Bates can maybe be the center of the future for this football team. So Ralph Wilson Sr. comes in, says, and this is, we'll close out with this one because this is a good one. My favorite stat, the Bills are the first team to have back-to-back victories at Ford Field since 2016.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
The Bills have the 4th best record in the NFL. That's a good one. That might change on Sunday when the Chiefs play the Rams, who are going to be starting Bryce Perkins at quarterback. And the Dolphins play the Texans. We'll be starting Josh Allen's brother, Kyle, at quarterback. Not actually Josh Allen's brother. Don't tell anyone that. And then Richard Forbes says these next 6 games are critical, no doubt, especially the next 3. We're already 0-2 in the division. The AFC East is upon us. New England, New York, Miami, and we will get back to you guys on Monday to begin that journey into this 3-game gauntlet against the AFC East. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Always appreciate you. We are nothing without you guys in the comment section, pushing us, making us better. Smash that like before you head out. Share this show with anyone you think would appreciate it or like to come hang out with us on Monday nights and before every game. And you can listen anytime when car ride to work, at the gym, doing chores, whatever, simply by going to any one of the major podcasting platforms and typing in Air Raid Buffalo. So if you want to listen, instead of looking at our beautiful bases, you can do that as well. All right, Dave, until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Are we having fun yet?